Hello friends, and welcome to another intriguing episode on our channel. Today, we're venturing into the shadowy corridors of the human mind, exploring the enigmatic final words uttered by some of history's most notorious murderers on the brink of their execution. From the chillingly calm to the remorselessly defiant, these last expressions provide a haunting glimpse into the psyche of individuals who once terrorized society. Join us as we delve into the chilling final words of these infamous individuals. We start our countdown with Timothy McVey, the Oklahoma City bomber. Notorious for orchestrating one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in American history, McVey's name is forever etched in the annals of infamy. The bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in April 1995 claimed 168 lives, including 19 children. McVey was captured, tried, and sentenced to death. As the day of his execution approached, many wondered whether he would express remorse for his actions, but his final words were not an apology. Instead, he chose a quote from the 19th century British poet William Ernest Henley's poem, Invictus. "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." These words, defiant to the last, reflected his unrepentant stance. McVey's last words remained unapologetic and defiant to the end. Next on our list is Peter Manuel, also known as the Beast of Birkinshaw. Manuel was a Scottish-American serial killer responsible for the deaths of at least 9 people during the 1950s. A master manipulator and a terrifying predator, he committed his heinous crimes with a chilling sense of calm and precision. Manuel was a master of evasion, outwitting the police for years. However, his ego eventually led to his downfall. He defended himself at his trial, a spectacle that only served to highlight his narcissism and lack of empathy. As he faced his impending execution, Manuel was asked if he had any last words. His response was a chilling testament to his remorseless nature. He said, "Turn up the radio and I'll go quietly." These words were a fitting end for a man who lived his life with a chilling disregard for others. Manuel's last words were chilling, revealing a man devoid of remorse. Moving on, we have the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy. Bundy was a law student with a promising future, but beneath his charming exterior lurked a terrifying monster. Bundy confessed to 30 murders, yet experts believe the actual number could be much higher. His crimes, spread across several states, were as gruesome as they were numerous, leaving a trail of horror in his wake. Bundy's trial was a spectacle, with the charismatic killer defending himself in court. Despite his charm and apparent normality, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Bundy was sentenced to death and spent his final years on death row. As he faced his execution in the electric chair, Bundy's last words were surprisingly remorseful. He expressed his deep regret and sorrow, saying, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." These final moments of contrition were a stark contrast to the brutal and horrifying crimes he committed throughout his life. Bundy's last words were a stark contrast to his brutal crimes. Next, we turn to the case of Eileen Waros, a rare female serial killer. Eileen was a woman whose life was marred by abuse, hardship, and desperation. Turning to sex work at a young age to survive, her life took a dark turn when she began to kill her clients. Convicted for the murder of 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990, Waros claimed that these killings were in self-defense. The court, however, saw things differently, and she was sentenced to death. As she faced her execution in 2002, Waros's final words were not of remorse or fear, but rather an eerie prophecy. She proclaimed, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." Waros's last words were a haunting prediction of her afterlife. We now delve into the case of Peter Kürten, known as the vampire maniac from Dusseldorf. Kürten, a figure who terrorized Germany in the early 20th century, earned his moniker due to his gruesome crimes and bloodlust. His reign of terror included a series of murders and assaults that shocked the nation, ultimately leading to his arrest and trial. During his trial, the extent of his monstrous deeds came to light, painting a chilling picture of a man devoid of empathy. Despite the horror he instilled, Kürten remained eerily calm throughout the proceedings, showing no remorse for his actions. As his execution neared, Kürten was asked if he had any final words. His response? A chilling, self-focused statement. He said, "After my head has been chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck?" Kürten's last words were disturbingly focused on his own death. Next we have James French, a man who seemingly sought his own execution. James French was a name that echoed through the annals of crime history, not so much for his gruesome acts, but for his peculiar stance towards his fate. French was already serving a life sentence for murder when he committed a second murder within prison walls, seemingly with the express intention of being sentenced to death. During his trial, French showed an unsettling acceptance of his impending demise, a stark contrast to the usual desperation and denial seen in such cases. It was as if he was marching towards his own end, a macabre dance with destiny. But the real kicker came at the end, just before his execution in the electric chair. French, in a macabre display of humor, turned to the press and uttered his infamous last words, "How's this for a headline? French fries." His dark humor made his last words arguably the most famous final words in history. Moving on, we turn to the case of Karl Panzram, a man who claimed to hate all of humanity. Born in the late 19th century, Panzram's life was a continuous series of crimes, ranging from burglary to arson, and ultimately, to murder. His disdain for mankind was so profound that he once stated, "I wish all mankind had one neck so I could choke it." A drifter by nature, Panzram committed crimes across several countries, and was eventually caught and sentenced to death for murder. His trial was as unconventional as his life, with Panzram refusing any attempts at legal aid, insisting on his guilt and welcoming his impending execution. As he faced his end, Panzram's final words were as chilling as his life of crime. He told his executioner, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard, I could kill a dozen men while you're fooling around." Unrepentant to the last, Panzram's last words were a chilling reflection of his life of violence. Next on our list is John Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown. Gacy's moniker came from his sideline gig as a clown at children's parties, a stark contrast to his horrifying secret life. Convicted for the murder of 33 young men and boys in the 1970s, Gacy was a real-life nightmare hiding behind a painted smile. His trial was a media circus, bringing to light the shocking details of his crimes. He lured his victims with promises of work, or simply by impersonating a police officer only to end their lives in his suburban Chicago home. When the time came for his execution in 1994, Gacy's last words were chillingly devoid of remorse. He simply said, "Kiss my ass." An audacious statement that echoed the depravity of his actions. Gacy's last words were a disturbing denial of his gruesome crimes. We now examine the case of Gary Gilmore, a man infamous for his desire to die. Gilmore's name echoed in the annals of crime due to his relentless pursuit of his own execution. His crimes were a shocking spree of armed robberies that ended in 2 cold-blooded murders, all within a span of 2 days in July 1976. His trial was swift, and he was sentenced to death, a verdict he embraced with an unsettling eagerness. He famously rejected any attempts to appeal his sentence, stating he'd rather die than spend his life in prison. Then came the day of his execution, January 17, 1977. As he faced the firing squad, his final words were a simple, stark phrase that has since been immortalized in the history of infamous last words. "Let's do it," he said, a chilling acceptance of his fate. Gilmore's last words were a chilling acceptance of his fate. Finally, we end with Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal. Dahmer's reign of terror lasted from the late 70s to the early 90s, where he committed heinous acts of murder and dismemberment, shocking the world with the extent of his depravity. Dahmer's trial was a media circus, with the public fascinated and horrified by the gruesome details of his crimes. He was eventually sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. But what's perhaps more chilling than the crimes themselves are his last words before his demise. At his final court appearance, Dahmer expressed a chillingly calm acceptance of his fate. He stated, "I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed, and created a Holocaust." It was a stark confession of his monstrous acts, a chilling end to a tragic, gruesome story. Dahmer's last words were a stark confession of his monstrous acts. This brings us to the end of our spine-chilling journey through the last words of notorious murderers. From Timothy McVey's stoic silence to Jeffrey Dahmer's remorseful apology, these final utterances offer a haunting glimpse into the minds of some of the world's most infamous criminals. They remind us of the importance of justice, and the often blurred lines between humanity and monstrosity. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel for more intriguing content. Until next time, stay safe.